Unless you've been living under a rock for the last few days, you've probably heard about the newest D&D video game that's making waves, Baldur's Gate 3. Made by Larian Studios, the creators behind the Divinity Original Sin series, this game is already a blockbuster hit, reaching over 800,000 peak concurrent players in its first week. For those who don't know, Baldur's Gate 3 is a computer role-playing game set in the D&D setting of Faerun. However, Baldur's Gate isn't a one-to-one translation of the player's handbook, and some changes have been made to the races, classes, and the mechanics to make it work in video game form. Some of these changes have been minor, but one of them caught my eye from the moment I encountered it in my first playthrough. As I explored through the tutorial with Human Fighter Man, the best race and class combo, I was eventually thrown into my first combat against a group of imps. Equipped with my longsword as a level 1 character, I prepared to charge forward and attack the imps, but I saw that I had quite a few attack options, from a basic attack, to a lacerate, to a charge attack. After dispatching the imps, I found some new weapons and saw that equipping them changed the options I had, impacted by whether or not I was proficient with the weapons I was equipping. My mind was blown. I had actual choices as a fighter beyond I move to attack. It's as if the fighter gods themselves came down from the heavens and bestowed me with forbidden knowledge that D&D combat can be fun and engaging without the use of spells or class abilities. Okay, maybe that's a bit dramatic, but still, from the very start of the game, as a level 1 character, I had multiple choices in combat as a mundane fighter with no spellcasting, purely through wielding weapons I am proficient with. This is what Larian gets right about weapons in D&D, and what I want to talk about today, because I think what Larian does should be the standard for future editions of D&D. So, let's go over exactly how Baldur's Gate implements these mechanics, and look at how they can make a standard 5th edition game feel so much more engaging. Let's get started by breaking down how these new weapon mechanics work. For the purpose of simplicity, we're only going to look at common and mundane weapons, so we're not going to be dealing with magical or unique weapon attacks and effects. Baldur's Gate 3 contains most of the weapons present in D&D 5th edition, including all simple melee weapons, simple ranged weapons excluding the dart and sling, martial melee weapons excluding the lance and whip, and martial ranged weapons excluding the blowgun and net. It also contains some extra weapons not present in tabletop, like the cleaver and pickaxe. These weapons generally reflect the same properties as their tabletop counterparts, such as having the same damage dice, being in the same category of simple or martial, having the same weapon reach, and having the same weapon properties, such as versatile or finesse. The main addition to weapons in Baldur's Gate 3 comes from weapon skills, also known as weapon actions. These weapon skills provide alternate actions and/or bonus actions for the weapons they are on. Currently, there are 18 weapon skills across all the common weapons in Baldur's Gate 3. Backbreaker, Melee Brace, Ranged Brace, Cleave, Concussive Smash, Crippling Strike, Flourish, Hamstring Shot, Heartstopper, Lacerate, Mobile Shot, Piercing Strike, Piercing Shot, Pommel Strike, Prepare, Rush Attack, Topple, and Weakening Strike. Some of these weapon skills are on multiple different weapon types. For example, the Lacerate weapon skill can be found on battle axes, glaives, great axes, great swords, halberds, hand axes, longswords, scimitars, and sickles. Certain weapons may also have multiple weapon skills available, such as the longsword having the pommel strike, lacerate, and rush attack skills. These weapon skills can be used once per short rest, and have various different effects. Some force the enemy to make a saving throw or suffer some negative condition, such as bleeding, dazed, or off balance, whereas others allow the user to sacrifice some movement speed to be able to re-roll the damage dice and take the higher result. That's right, Larian didn't just add more weapon skills. They added new conditions to accompany these actions, on top of the existing conditions in 5e. Bleeding, for example, inflicts 2 slashing damage per turn and disadvantage on Constitution saving throws. Unfortunately, the wiki isn't fully updated for all of these status effects yet, so I can't go through all of them like I did with the weapon skills. Just know that many of the new weapon skills rely on these conditions to inflict new effects. So overall, weapon skills are proficiency-based maneuvers that vary based on weapon type, and allow the user to inflict various new conditions onto enemies in combat. Now, it's no secret that I find the weapons of 5th edition to be more than a little lacking. I mean, I'm making an entire video series on how to make mundane weapons better. And considering Larian went through the effort to add all of these options, I'm likely to believe that they agree with me. But why do Larian's changes actually matter for D&D? Well, there's 3 main benefits I've found from the use of weapon skills. To start, weapon skills, as Larian has implemented them, benefit basically every class, because they are dependent on weapon proficiency. The 1D&D playtest is attempting to develop something similar with weapon mastery, but this falls a bit short if left as it is currently in the playtest. Currently, weapon mastery is only available to classes that gain it as a first level feat, meaning fighters, barbarians, monks, paladins, rangers, and rogues, or to those who take the weapon master feat. By having weapon skills be based on weapon proficiency rather than class or feat choice, more classes can innately benefit from using them, as almost every class will gain proficiency in some weapon or another. As I mentioned earlier, weapon skills also add new conditions, which broaden the amount of things the party and monsters can do. These new conditions add more variety and team play options to the game by, for example, allowing non-spellcasters to inflict conditions that lower an enemy's dexterity saving throws, setting up the wizard to pull off a sick fireball. Plus, the basic bandit might be a low-level foe, but now that they have the ability to inflict bleed with a scimitar, they become a more tactical threat rather than a basic beginner enemy. The limit of weapon skills to once per short rest balances these abilities. With a limit like this, players have to choose whether to use these weapon skills on a tough fight or save them for a potentially tougher fight around the corner. As an added benefit to the Warlock players out there, it'll also help encourage the rest of the party to actually want to take a short rest, so that's a nice plus. Ultimately, weapon skills add more choices right at level 1 that give innate actions and bonus actions depending on equipment choice and playstyle preference. This gives players more chances to make impactful choices that let them customize their gameplay experience to fit how they want to play. With all that being said, there are some negatives to keep in mind if Wizards of the Coast were to implement this system into a future iteration of tabletop D&D. Starting with the biggest issue, weapon skills add more things the players and DMs need to track as they adventure, which can be a handful depending on the character. Baldur's Gate 3 is a video game after all, and can automate a lot of that tracking for you. In tabletop, however, the players and DM would have to track whether or not they've used these abilities on their character sheets, and remember to recharge them when they short rest. This could theoretically be automated in virtual tabletops, but for traditional pen and paper D&D, it's a lot to remember on top of all the other features that players and their characters are juggling. The second main issue of this system is that if the player characters can use weapon skills, so can NPCs. That basic bandit that I mentioned earlier now has more fun stuff they can do to player characters with a basic scimitar, which is fun for dungeon masters, but it also makes them more deadly. possibly too deadly for a level 1 or 2 party. This pushes the burden of balancing further onto dungeon masters, as they'll be the ones who have to choose whether to use these weapon skills on the party or not, depending on how the party's doing. The final negative I'd like to point out is that if more choices of actions and bonus actions were added to the game that theoretically anyone could take advantage of, combat turns would take longer to go through. The simple fact is, when you give people more things to choose from, they'll take longer on their turns to figure out what they might want to do. Spellcasters get the brunt of this currently, considering just how many spells they have to sort through to find the one they might want to use in a specific situation. But I have no doubt that non-spellcasters would take just as long to sort through their weapon options, especially if they're a newer player. So, with the good comes some bad. However, I still believe that the positive impacts of weapon skills in D&D would outweigh the negatives people would feel. At the end of the day, if combat in Baldur's Gate 3 were exactly as it is in 5th edition D&D, the game's combat would not be as engaging or fun as it currently is. There'd be less action options, non-casters would feel bland, and the introductory combat encounters would probably turn some people off from the game entirely. So, if the base 5th edition combat system isn't engaging enough for Baldur's Gate 3, why should we settle for it in the tabletop? But I want to know what you all think. Do you think weapon skills should be added to future editions of D&D? Do you think they need some tweaks if they were going to be added? Or do you prefer the combat as it is currently? Go ahead and let me know in the comments below, or over on the Alt-Roll Discord. If you'd like to learn more about tabletop D&D, you can also tune into the live courses we run that explain all the basics you need to know. If you'd like to support Alt-Roll and videos like this, you can also leave a one-time or recurring donation on our Ko-fi page. Otherwise, a simple like helps us out a lot too. However, that's everything I had for you today. Thank you all for watching, make sure to have a great rest of your day, and I'll see all of you next time.